so pleased today to talk to Stu Davison, ex-colleague. I think of him as family. He's now in the US, but I'm also incredibly stoked for him and bleed his brain dry of what he's seeing. Hey, Stu, afternoon, isn't it for you?
Yeah, it is. It's the end of the business. End of the business day here in the US, Monday, and it's been good, but great to chat. Thank you.
I've got to ask, what's the buzz around with all the election stuff? How different is it to New Zealand?
Very, very, very different 2 weeks to what you'd ever get in New Zealand. Politics, I think we forget in New Zealand how close we get to politics. Like I said to someone the other day, like I was back in New Zealand in February and I was in the beehive talking to politicians in their office, and that's a real thing we have in New Zealand that is very unusual in the rest of the world. So you compare that to the last 2 weeks here in the US, and you realize how different we are and unique, and what we have is as a benefit. But I think the big one for the markets is that this is massive stuff. Last week or the week prior with Trump, the assassination attempt on Trump, and that turned things around. And then the weekend with Biden announcing he's not running again for the election is huge as well. Just even one thing that affects us already that I've been watching this morning is the exchange rates. USD, NZD dropping through the 6,000 mark, and that was just huge. I woke up and thought, what's going on there? That's out the gate, and just that sort of reminder that even if politics changed in New Zealand, the rest of the world wouldn't care. But we've got potential president movement, and the world is just standing up and watching. And for a Kiwi over here, it's incredible to see. But I'm just not prepared for it. We've got the Chicago Democratic rally, whatever they call it over here, in a couple of weeks. Being the foreigner in town, the amount of people that have said it's going to be big. Probably if you're going to have a holiday, go away in that week because you don't want to be in the city for it. And it's for me, I'm like, we have protests and we have rallies in New Zealand, we have little things, but no one's ever said to me, don't go to Wellington or don't go to Auckland that week because it's not where you want to be. And I'm like, oof. So for me, that just sort of spoke to the level of political heat that is in the US at the moment. And being an observer is interesting, but it's also a little bit terrifying at the same time.
What a fantastic way to learn about it, because it's still monumentally historic for them, isn't it?
Well, exactly. Yeah. You take the assassination attempt. It's the first in 40 years, I think. And then, not very often does a first-term president not get re-elected. That's pretty uncommon. So we had that with Trump, and now we're going to have it with Biden as well. So it's wild times. And then I think just in terms of geopolitically, is looking outside of the US as well, what that means. I think that the FX markets have responded to that as well. Commodity markets are sort of taking it and digesting it, and everyone else is just trying to figure out what's going on, or what it's going to mean post November. It's big times of change, and I think that the other one too is this whole year politically. We've had France elections, we've had everything else. The world's voted quite broadly, but it's big changes, and there's a lot to figure out going forward, and we'll get through 24, and 25 is going to be probably just as volatile as everything starts to settle out with most likely Trump in place and how the world reacts to that.
Yeah. It's an interesting time, isn't it?
Well, exactly right. And that's for everyone too. Like I think the markets, sitting down and digesting, it's the equities, commodities, FX, all the markets are sitting back and saying, right, what's the outcome going to likely be? And there's lots of analysts around the world that sit around and do this for a living, and I don't count myself as being as good as those guys. I usually follow them, but seeing what they say and how they're looking at, that's exactly what they're saying. They're like, right, projected outcomes of the equities market is likely to be this, right? Let's start trading towards that. It's not let's complain about Trump or let's complain about this and let's complain about that. It's right, this is likely to happen now. This is in our binomial tree of decisions. Let's just get on and do that. And for me, that's one of those cool things watching the markets. Like, okay, cool, right, that makes sense because you're not going to change it. You're not going to change the millions of people that are going to vote for these guys. And you look at the bond markets in France or the euro bonds after those France elections, and the same thing happened. Like the market reacted, said, right, this is the likely outcome. Let's move the yields, and then everyone, and markets responded, and that's kind of. That proactive response was pretty cool. And like you said, even though we're going to go through volatility, I haven't actually looked at the VIX index today, but like the volatility isn't going to slow down. If anything, more is uncertain, but you can actually just say, right, what are we going to do in response to the uncertainty? Make a decision.
Yeah, and I think it's always been uncertain. I think we've just become more aware that we can't forecast as well as we thought we could before. Society's shifted and things are moving fast in that as well. So I think it's the most wonderful time for opportunity, and it's a brilliant time to learn. Hey, do you want to give us a bit of background? I'm fascinated by how much effort you put into developing and growing and learning.
Where do we start? Right.
Mr. Overachiever.
We wouldn't go that far. Yeah, so Waikato, born and raised boy on a dairy farm south of Te Awamutu, which is where I call home. So mum and dad have quite a few dairy farms there still, and dad's still slaving away on the farm, which impresses me every day. From there, shot down to Canterbury to do my university studies, graduated at Lincoln with a Bachelor of Agriculture, love agriculture, really have a big passion for grass and cows. And the whole industry as a whole, to be honest. Did that, finished up farming, went back to the home farm for the sort of post-degree apprenticeship with the old boy. Did a few years at home working for him, went offshore to the UK to do the OE, sort of me and the wife-to-be at the time, packed our bags and took off for a year to sort of see this for the world and really reevaluate what we knew about life. And that was very transformative. We did 6 months in Scotland working on an arable farm, and at the same time, we did another 2 months on a dairy farm in Scotland as well, which was just brilliant to see how someone else did things and opened our eyes up to the rest of the world. And the other 6 months of that year, we travelled around Europe and everywhere. We skied in Austria for a week. We ran with the bulls in Pamplona. We went right up to Norway, just had a whale of a time. Still sits very highly in our memory bank of fun times. That was great. Suggest to anyone at that stage of life, go and do it. You'll never regret it. Don't worry about the money, just go and do it. Came back to New Zealand, jumped straight back onto the farm with the old boy. Did 2 or 3 years at home on the farms, and then went share milking maybe 2 years after I got home, or a year after I got home from Europe, on 200 cow farm. And then 2 years later, we took on a contract milking farm as well. So we were running a share milking and a contract milking farm for a year. Had a bit of a interesting employment relationship during that year, and created a turning point in my life to basically look at my career a little bit differently. Obviously loved farming, but the situation that arose sort of presented some challenges, and I thought, this could be a good chance to pivot. At the same time, I was doing my Kellogg's Rural Leadership course through Lincoln as well, and that was very much a key to my transformation process. That really exposed me to the passion I had for the dairy industry outside of the farm gate, and sort of showed me that there's a lot there. There's a lot I don't know. My perceived ideology of what the market was somewhat right, but mostly wrong, and had a real desire to fill that gap. And so with my Kellogg project, actually managed to sort of start that journey of understanding what the rest of the market looked like, and that really that led to an opportunity with NZX with yourself, JJ. That was great. Applied for an NZX role, met the NZX team, and hit it off as an analyst there. Realized when I got NZX, my dairy background really provided me the privilege of being a voice of reasoning within the market in terms of what milk supply in New Zealand did. Breaking that down for a lot of people in the market that didn't have that ladder back into what was the farmer thinking in New Zealand, what are they going to respond to, how does the future look, and sort of carved a niche for myself in that situation, which I still leverage a lot to this day. At the same time, working at NZX was brilliant. It was a great time. JJ runs a great team, and really enjoyed my time there. But the one that I realized was that I needed to go out and further my sort of finance side of things too. So I decided to jump on Lincoln's offering of a fees-free masters, and jumped into that. So I took on a taught masters and completed that a year and a half later. And then
in finance, right?
Masters in finance, yep. And so that was fun. That really helped me develop my analytic skills and everything else. And on the back of that, a year and a half ago, High Ground Dairy here in Chicago reached out. We worked with High Ground Dairy and NZX. We were sort of trading data and insights, and had a really good relationship with them. They had an opportunity to come up in Chicago for me to come over. Jumped on that with both hands, and the Masters in Finance really helped me get the visa process sorted and get me in here, and again prove some further need or niche within this market. And then to add to my further overachieving, which sounds like a terrible list when you start going through it, currently doing my CFA, so Chartered Financial Analyst accreditation, what do you want to call it, qualification, which is really exciting, to be honest, to be doing a little bit more study, get a little bit more free time, as my wife is not in the country with me at the moment. She's on her way up, but good reason to use up those evenings and weekends that I'd otherwise be spending with her, doing a little bit of study, and basically fulfilling that desire to keep learning.
When you think about it, you've got that practical side, and look, I want to kind of beef out a bit probably wrong wording in the dairy thing, but as far as when you came through NZX, the huge value was that our data's delayed. And so we tell people there's a drought, then they see this data and it doesn't make sense. And you're able to say, well, actually in this part, sometimes you need to break down the production process because I don't think people realize how big a black hole. Like, I was shocked. Like, I thought New Zealand was this like huge open book, transparent it is, and there's still traders who won't touch most of the market because they can't get data that actually allows them to model it. So again, it's a black hole, and I don't think our farmers understand that. I don't think our New Zealand-based market analysts understand how big a black hole it is. And I think if you don't have that production knowledge, it's really hard to interpret what's happening.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that's what we say to a lot of traders, or a lot of traders say here as well, as the finance side of trading is easy to understand than it is pasture growth. And I say I completely agree. To understand the dynamics of, temperature, like to put a further backstop around that too, like New Zealand's pasture system is unique to a certain extent. There's other countries that graze grass through their lactation curves as well. That's not foreign completely to cows, but it's the way that we majority supplement based and weather dependent. If you think about a lot of other dairy production systems like the US, for example, very responsive to feed and income.
Yeah.
And so that margin makes the biggest driver. So you can kind of see it within month to month. Milk price moves monthly, feed prices can be moved monthly. You see the response really quickly. In New Zealand, we're so weather dependent because of the pasture that we run. It takes that insight into sort of like right now, we're late July. We're looking ahead to the production season. There's a whole lot of people that are going to buy their whole milk powder, buy their skim, buy their butter, and they don't actually know what supply is going to look like in New Zealand. That's one side they've got no idea. And as an analyst, that's what we try and help them with. But again, we have to have this caveat of, look, if the weather moves in August or moves in September or moves in February, for argument's sake, the outcome is going to be dramatically different. And if you don't understand what that means, you can get really confused. And the big one we always go back to is rain. Rain. What does rain mean for New Zealand? And people get half that story. A lot of people go, oh, it's raining in New Zealand. That's really good. And I go, yeah, it's June or it's August. You don't want rain. And then I go through, rain creates mud. Mud doesn't help with harvesting the pasture. That impacts milk production. And it's this, but doesn't someone tell me rain was good? And I was like, yeah, rain's good here. Rain's not good there. And it's that
rain's
discussion
good in California.
Exactly. Yeah, rain's good in California until it creates a lake in Lake Torrelleri, and then you're really in trouble. But that's the thing of, it's all well and good understanding the local market, and it's the ability to communicate it through to someone else. That's the real value. And that's, again, I came off the farm thinking, how am I going to fit to this world? And quite quickly realized actually it's quite a niche value to be able to communicate what it means, how it all works, and created a lot of value out of it.
You kind of make it sound like you one day got off a tractor and then the next day you put on a suit. But the reality of it is you had done some pre-work. You kind of knew you were connecting dots. You certainly didn't come in going, everyone's going to want to hear about how cows are milked.
Oh yeah, couldn't agree more. And like, it's building upon knowledge continuously. And I think that's the biggest change every day as an analyst and as a broker of what I'm doing here, is that like, what you know today is relevant, but tomorrow everything changes. And it's that you can have all the foresight, and like, I run multiple models of forecasts, and be it someone else's weather forecast or my own forecast for prices or production or whatever it is that we've modeled out. It's all well and good until tomorrow's data turns up. And then that's the beauty of a forecast. It's really good today, and tomorrow it can be completely wrong. And so that's that sort of, you can create some certainty, but again, you've got to realize that actually you don't know everything. There's going to be something that you miss, and I think that goes a lot in life as well, right? You think you know how your life's going to turn out, and like me, I thought I was always going to be a farmer for the rest of my life, and following the gumboot steps of the old boy. But here we are sitting in Chicago 4 years later, and I wake up some days, look out the window in Chicago and go, well, same in winter, and go, it was snowing here in Chicago in January, and I go, I could be milking cows, but here I am in Chicago, still very passionately in the dairy industry, doing something that I never thought, or even in my wildest dreams, thought I'd be here doing. And so again, it's the same for all parts of life. You never know what's around the corner.
Oh, and I think that's a beautiful point too, around you don't necessarily always have to be, and of course we need people to milk cows, and of course we need people to do all the wonderful things, but on the farm. But also, if that's not your niche, if that's not you, I think of Scott Townsend, who's got an awesome Trev, he's got the technology that he's set up that helps farmers manage farming and document things. And then, we've got lots of other examples of, Will Barrett, who I talked to, he did similar pathway as you, on the farm, on the ground. Same with Scott. These you can do that and then go and have these amazing impacts
Mm.
across the sector.
Oh, 100%. Oh, and that's the thing. I don't look back at my time on the farm as a bad thing. I think that's the most formative years of my career I've had. I mean, the agri degree at Lincoln was awesome. Probably spent more time in a pub than I did
Yeah, I
anywhere
was going to
else.
say, I think it's the entertainment
Um,
around it, not the degree, but yeah.
but hey, that really helps this day and age in networking. Like I am a network master, and it's great. But I think that's the thing too, is like farmers, especially the young age in New Zealand, that we get into farming and we are running businesses, like contract milkers, share milkers, even farm managers running very large businesses in New
Yeah.
Zealand. Like you look at the capital value of a farm, you say even a 600 cow farm in the Waikato, even a 400 cow close to town, right? You're looking at land value 60, 70k a hectare. Every cow, you lose a cow, that's 2k down the drain, cost plus production for the year, all those sort of things. Farmers in New Zealand are operating businesses that are large. Like in capital terms, they're relatively large compared to a lot of other small to medium enterprises in New Zealand. So I always look back and think not many people fresh out of uni within 5 years have the running the
Yeah.
capital size that we were. And then you look at the guys in Canterbury, or guys and girls in Canterbury running those big outfits down there. Like, let's not forget how much business acumen it takes to run those outfits, to get things right, to forecast, feed, everything, finances, staff. Like, it's one of those things I think we as an industry forget really quickly. I know we're pretty good business
Yeah.
people as a whole, and it goes back, everyone compares profits and production and rah. But even to get milk in the vat, 300 days of that lactation through the season, that's a pretty big achievement, and it's not something to be winked at either. It's formative for anyone, and I think we as an industry sometimes forget just how important it is.
Oh, and how much we can, I mean, there's many, many stories of people who, and sometimes it's just bad timing, right? Like, it's not
Mm.
about you being good or bad or whatever. Someone who went contract milking before the GFC, or someone like all these things. Or someone who got their first share milking job and bought cows. And I think sometimes there's also these amazing stories that I love as these people who it hasn't worked and they've
Mm.
rebuilt.
Oh, exactly right, and that's the aspect of risk tolerance at that point in age needs to be reflected upon. Like you say, there's never a better time to go and lose or go and fail than in your 20s. Like,
Oh God,
you
yeah.
get to your 30s, you've still got a lot of time to keep going. Like, you can rebuild. You can do it in your 40s too. Like, fuck, we're all going to go through that. That's all part of the fun in life. Like, you're never gonna. It's like you flip a coin. You're never going to win every time. It's the same in life. Every day is going to present struggles and challenges. It's how you navigate them too. And I think like our share milking job, it was 200 cows. It was only small.
Yep.
It was a way to build equity. And let's be honest, we came out the other side. We worked bloody hard for that
Yep.
job, and it was. I still remember nights spreading fur, finishing up on the old boys farm and drive the tractor around to the share milking job to spread fur or in all night, and just long hard hours. And I look back and I thought, oh, we're not millionaires after this 3 years. What's going on? Like the expectation is when you go share milking, you're going to make all this money really quickly. But the truth is that you're not. It's the truth is that it's a challenge, and getting everything right is what determines your outcome. And sometimes you have to learn what you got wrong to then get things right later on in the
Yeah.
future. And so I look back now and kind of go, right, when we what we do going forward, what are the mistakes we've learned? How do we do things differently? And me and Soph sit down and talk about this all the time. Right, if we're going to do that, we learned from that. What are we going to do differently? What does that mean? What are the risks we look at now? Even when we talk to other people about their farms, we see this now, we see that. Having stepped off the farm and having more time to think about it, this is what we'd see things going forward. And just having that opportunity to actually breathe and think about farming operations and just business as a whole is a whole lot refreshing now. And like I say to anyone, just basically jump off the farm for a week and just don't think about it for a week, and then look at it again.
Yeah, and look, I just want to sort of flesh that out a bit in the sense that Soph's doing her PhD as well in animal nutrition, and Soph's amazing. You both have this great desire to learn and grow and understand systems.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think we really learnt that pretty quickly in Scotland. Was the when we were there for OE was, and we both of us there together was pretty cool. But I think we both really quickly realised that what we knew at home was relevant to there and okay, but actually that Scotland trip made us realise what we didn't know. And yeah, it was now we're on this like never-ending quest of learning, and obviously both going to university and having that desire to learn. And neither of us obviously have given that up. We keep bloody signing up for more and more study one way or the other.
They do. Yeah.
It's the same way we eat. Our plates are always full, it's great. But that desire to learn has been really cool. And I think we, within me and Soph's relationship, we lean on that a whole lot in terms of learning, discussing things at a high level. They can get pretty heated. These discussions sometimes can get pretty heated. But the sort of context of the discussions that we have are huge. And to be honest, both of our passions are how can we help other people do better? How can we improve things, be it for our own businesses, for our own careers going forward, but also other people like, and you share this passion as well. When someone rings up or someone texts and asks a question, that really gets me excited. Just how can I help someone? What can I provide them leverage to go forward? I think that's why being an analyst really excites me as well. Because the hard thing is, you write reports as an analyst, and sometimes you sit behind the computer screen and you go, is someone actually reading this? And then you talk to someone on a call, or you get an email back and they ask him for more, and then they come back and say that was brilliant, that we've been trying to put that together for a while, or this, that, and the next thing, and you realize that actually you're helping people, and that's brilliant. Like it's a real buzz that I didn't realize I was going to get leaving the farm, but it's the same. And the same on the farm, you think about young farmers, or you think about your neighbors, and someone would ring and go, oh, we're cutting silage, or this is broken, have you got this, or can you come help us with firewood, whatever it is. That was just part and parcel of the community. And so that was a big thing for me and Soph. And we've same again here, we see it as other opportunities, and we probably hopefully now can provide a little bit more value than cutting someone's firewood for an afternoon. But that's sort of something that drives us a fair bit.
I find that people try to use lots of words and sound smart as opposed to just interpret what the hell's happening in the market. We don't need to be working out who's got the biggest dictionary. An analyst's responsibility is to translate in a way that is balanced what is happening today in the market and what might happen in the future. And you have the courage to do forecasts.
Yeah, at the risk of my own head, which is always great fun. But that's the thing. Like, it took me a while and a lot of encouragement from yourself in the early days, and obviously other people as well, having in that spectre of like, I can give you I can print the same data that's available to everyone else, and I can put it in a fancy graph, and I can give you it in a table. I can put whatever you want with it. But actually, it's irrelevant because everyone else has the same data. Someone wants to know what you think, and that's the goal of the analyst, and that's what people pay money for, right? Or don't, if they get in a magazine and they want to see someone else's opinion. But that's the kicker of my job, is actually being able to say, look, this is what we see. Here are the 5 signals that we've put together. Let's say, like, New Zealand milk production came out this morning. New Zealand milk production was down. What does it mean? Why? What's happened? What are the drivers? And then what does that mean going forward? Okay, well then put that together for me so I'd understand. And that's the power of making yourself different, or making those insights actually leverageable for someone else. And it's not as easy as everyone makes out to be, because you can see the data and you can see what everyone else has got, and you can sort of leverage whatever someone else has said. But until you can actually break it down, and like you said, in simple language so someone else can understand it, put some theory behind it, be that economic theory, be that market theory, whatever it is, be that even just what, like you've heard something from a trader, you've heard something from Fonterra, something came out in Bloomberg, whatever it is, and then piece those bits together and say, right, we see these things happening. This means this could happen. And it's like I said earlier, it's right for the next 5 minutes. And, it's an opinion and it's a forecast, and forecasts have a lot of, tendencies to be wrong. But it's the fact that it's like, right, this is where we see things going. These are the reasons why. Here's the information for you to then make a decision from. And that's what you got to do. And I find a lot of people sort of expect that forecast will always be right. And it's, for me, the big one that I always encourage people to think about is, take my forecast and use it as much as you think, but go see someone else's. Go use as many of other people's forecasts, and then leverage what you think is best, and agree and disagree as you need, and carry on in your day. Because at the end of the day, I've provided what I think is the best and what I can do best, but sometimes I'm going to be wrong. And I think that's, for many businesses, that's how things operate. Like, you can make a marketing decision on an advert, or you can make a capital investment decision that you think is right. But at the end of the day, whatever decision you make tomorrow you're going to redefine that decision tomorrow too.
Yeah, and I think though with the forecast, it's important for people to understand that it's on the day. It's a set of data. It's a range of data sets that include time, and time's the big factor.
Yeah, and
Now,
it's that merging of the two is the challenging thing, and
yeah,
that's what defines a good analyst is literally putting your forecast on a piece of paper and saying, actually, I don't agree with that because of these things, and that's the hardest thing to do is here's my forecast, this is what the model spit out. Actually, you know what, guys, I don't agree with this model at the moment. This is where I see things tracking, and actually
yeah.
just drawing your own line on it and saying, computer, as my favorite little Britain comment,
Computer said yes.
yeah, exactly. And then just drawing the line somewhere else and saying, well, this is where I think it's going to go on these other ideas.
Yeah.
And it's hard because you're going away from what the computer says. So you got to
Yeah.
be brave and sometimes step into the foray and just get on with it.
Oh, and not always be looking back. Most humans can see when a chart goes up or down, and when you're right, the price has gone up, the price has gone down. They've
Yeah.
seen it in a chart, like it's a bit. But anyway, let's do some milky stuff, because I think now I'm thinking what's actually happened today. First, I want to give a shout out to High Ground, because I absolutely love Alyssa Badger. She's one of my most favorite people in the world. And now that two of my most favorite people in the world are working together, it's quite. But High Ground, I mean, Alyssa's background's incredible. I think through cotton, right the way through, incredible dairy analyst, now runs the High Ground business. And it's great for you because you're around these incredible humans and you're bringing your flavor to the table.
Like I say, I'm the resident Kiwi in the high ground team, and the best thing being in America and in the dairy industry is that the moment this mouth starts opening and this accent starts coming out, they know exactly where I come from, or they usually get it wrong and call me Australian. But the moment we set them straight and explain that I'm a Kiwi and the background, not only does it give me a little bit of credibility, but it also makes it hard for them to understand me. But no, it's great, and I think the reason that Kiwi on the high ground team is so important is New Zealand's a very important exporter of dairy into the world to the rest of these regions. The reason I'm an American team is to try and help our American clients understand what's going on in New Zealand so they can figure that out. And let's be clear, the benefit of America to New Zealand right now is that America is our fourth biggest trade partner at the moment, and the trade into America on butter at the moment, casein, like we just ran our June's figure of casein and caseinates was the biggest in the last 15 or so years. Like, they were massive. So the high proteins into the US at the moment are insane. Anyway, and back on track. So that's why I'm part of the high ground team, and Eric and Badger here in the high ground dairy team are just brilliant to work with, and the rest of the team as well. But it's quite the privilege to be here as a Kiwi and learn from these guys, and to put, this probably means not a lot to a whole lot of people, but being a little bit of a finance geek, the office here, we're in the middle of Chicago downtown, the Chicago Board of Trade building, which is historically where futures market started, is right next door. And so I pinch myself some days when we sit in the conference room and I look out the window and there's Ceres, the god of agriculture, on top of the CBOT building, up, on top of the building. It's pretty cool just to say, right, we're in the middle of things here. And just to realize that in terms of commodities, dairy being one of the minor parts of that commodity tree, but it's pretty cool to be here in the middle of the commodities world and understand and see things tick by and understand the breadth of just how big this market is.
Never ever lose that feeling. Never lose that feeling.
Yeah.
So you said that production data came out this morning. What's happening?
Well, the upside was it's June's data, so it was only minor. It was down a little bit. Well, it was down more than I thought it was. So again, forecast got wrong. Happy to do that one. But a lot of the driver was obviously milk price last season wasn't that tidy for a lot of guys, tight on margin, and people just dried off a little bit sooner. So a little bit drier through May prompted even just a few days early dry for some people. But again, just that less spring herds going into June. A couple of days of milking into June for guys in the Waikato would have moved that decans data quite significantly. So that's the sort of thing going on there. But looking forward again, we're in July, so guys and girls, across the Waikato,
right.
calves on the
ground.
ground.
We're guys friendly. We know that's a neutral term.
That's good. So guys calving across the Waikato, flat out, and we've seen milk and vats already at the moment. So we know the new season's underway, but like I said earlier, the question is where we see New Zealand milk production going forward. And we talk about milk price here as well, because that's one of those key drivers behind weather. You can predict weather all you want, but most of the time you're going to be somewhat wrong. Milk price is a little bit easier to forecast in terms of where we see things going. And at the moment, it's not looking great, to be honest. We're not going to be printing a $9 handle like everyone thinks we were.
What time frame are you talking?
I'm talking current season. So sorry, short on the nose.
Okay.
On the nose, yeah. So we're trading the milk price future sort of between the 8.30, 8.20 mark at the moment for the current season, the 24-25 season. And it's one of those things of, the market's moved down pretty steadily over the last couple of months. So GDT auctions have hurt a little bit. But again, it's that realization when you look at the data that seasonally things do this every year. Like we always have a ride pre the market where expectations are really hot. We get into the season and all of a sudden all this extra Oceania whole milk powder turns up on the market and buyers go, cool, thanks for that. I will wait. And demand just sits there and waits, and all that volume turns up and they get it at a seasonal discount. And so from a milk price perspective, we see the media headlines and all the sort of carrying on GDTs fall on this, and we had that pretty nasty 6-handle fall the other day. We picked that one. We were expecting it. Like seasonality prices were due to either decline in July or the decline in August. It's one or the other. And you have to have a pretty strong global dairy market, and that's as aggregate, everywhere, price-wise, to do a counter-seasonal move through spring in New Zealand. It's very uncommon. And so that's the thing around milk price at the moment. Looking ahead is, and going back to milk production, milk prices aren't looking hot. I don't think anyone's going to be brave enough, even though we've seen feed prices in New Zealand decline a little bit. I don't think anyone's going to be brave enough to feed extra or chase production this season. I think it's one of those right. Let's just get through the season. We know we can make money at $8, provided nothing goes too crazy. Interest rates might give us a little bit of a redeeming factor later in the season. Please reserve bank. Let's do that. There's nothing really to say milk production is going to go crazy. So we go back to our forecast and we go, right, well, things aren't going to be hugely bigger than last year. Last year was impressive on its own. So like a flat result would actually be positive in terms of Kiwi farmers punching out as much milk as they did last year, which again, unless weather really upsets things, seems very plausible.
What would your tips be then for a farmer? Because I think you and I used to talk about this, the frustration of every fortnight. And I even get sick of the headlines. It's good, it's bad, it's good, it's bad, it's good, it's bad. It's actually just a fortnight.
Yeah, and that's the tough one. I think, and like you said, that summed it up really well. Behind the farm gate, your day-to-day is obviously grass and cows, right? Grass, cows, getting the calves out of them, getting the milk in the vat and putting calves back in them, and making sure everything's tickety-boo on farm. You don't really have a whole lot of headspace spare on most or more operations to think, what's my milk price doing? How much revenue am I going to make? Obviously you've run your budget, you've done all that, you've convinced your banker, you've done all that, but actually waking up every Wednesday morning as a Kiwi farmer and rolling out of bed, and I know everyone still does this because I get texts, is that, GDT's done this, oh no, what are we going to do? And it's that, for me, you've got two options. And I didn't learn this until I left farming, and wish I had known it when I was farming, was you've actually got two options, thankfully, is you can either speculate and let it happen, and you're going to get upset and happy when GDT moves for or against what your view is, or you can manage that risk. So either way, you've made a decision, right? And that's the big one for me, is making those decisions is, and again, preference here, high grain dairy, we are brokers. This is not financial advice, but it's that thing of you can go and manage your risk in terms of your revenue, or you cannot. Either way, you've made a decision. And for me, looking back, and even with the farming interests I've got at the moment, it's that decision of make a decision and then deal with it. Then GDT can do what it wants. Away we go. It creates a lot of headlines and tension that you don't really want or need, because it clouds what you should be doing, which is basically farming as best you can, making the profit margin that you budget to make, and then printing at the end of the month, at the end of the season, and carrying on and doing it all again next year. It seems like a very simplified approach to say it like that in that short amount of words, but the key there is that, like you said, every 2 weeks you can either make or break your week, or your week, your fortnight. And I feel like that's an unhealthy relationship with the outcome of what it could be. Like, I do this in my milk price presentation, so I'm harking back to literature we've already used, but like we'll argue and we'll discuss over beers, over barbecue, interest rates all day long, or PK. I can guarantee I can pick any farmer in the Waikato and they'll know the PK price, and they'll tell me what they've locked in and what percent. They can tell me what urea is selling for at the moment. They can tell me what their rubberware is going to cost. They can tell me everything, and then I can go, all right, so what's your milk price? I don't know. I think it's going to be this. I was like, cool. So have we done anything about that? No. Oh, okay. Why not? And I would have the same response as a farmer prior to getting into this industry too. And I feel it going back to that, like wanting to provide help to the rest of the industry, is actually there's this tool here that can just mitigate all that stress. yeah, you might not win every year, and winning is a terrible term to use it, but I'm going to say it because, yeah, some years your neighbour might get $1 more than you. He might get 50 cents more than you, but it doesn't matter because you might have got better sleep through the season, and your banker is going to be like happy with you. Your wife's probably going to be happy with you too, and all those sort of bits and pieces of like you've mitigated so much of your stress that it's just it's got to make life easier. And I think back to my old man in the last 20 years he's done. You think through the 08, 09 crisis, which hurt like crazy, and then the 14-15 season as well.
Yeah.
The length of time it took farmers to farm out of that hole post 14-15 was just, and I timed this perfectly because I was driving down the Autobahn in Germany when Fonterra announced that $3.90 forecast, and I vividly remember looking over the side going, whoa, good thing we weren't share milking that year. But again, it's that that realization that these commodity markets move dramatically quickly, and I say dramatically quickly in terms of within a season. The variation is huge. The risk of whole milk powder price halving is not impossible, never. The risk of butter prices, like right now, are at record highs. They can fall. There's no reason for them not to fall 50% in the next 6 months. No reason at all. It's very possible. They can go another 50% from there too. So it's that realization that and going back to forecasts as well, it's all well and good with what's happening right now, but things going forward change so quickly. You can be right today and very wrong tomorrow. And having something in your back pocket, you can go, right, I can just mitigate all that headache. I don't have to wake up to GDT. I don't have to. I can listen to whatever I want and read whatever I want because I've mitigated those risks, and it's part and parcel.
Well, don't get panicked by the headline that says, "Oh, great day to be in farming. Oh, terrible time to be farming. Great day to be in dairy." Like whenever I read those headlines, I'm like, it's just, in particular, I think in the rural publications, sometimes they get a little bit carried away, but it doesn't help because if you were already
No.
under immense stress, and like you said before, you make a decision. You don't want to manage your risk, or sorry, you don't want to, use fixed pricing or whatever with your milk price. That's fine. You've made a decision. Stick to it. The great thing about that is you can change that decision if you haven't done it halfway through, right? And you never hedge everything, so there's always opportunity for Somerset level. And it's not a win or lose. It's actually, like you say, getting some sleep. It's actually one less variable that you're sitting there crapping your pants about because there's so much you can't control. Why ignore the stuff that you can?
Well, that's the thing. Going back to that weather point is you can't control the weather. You can control your milk price a little bit, and even if you like the weather argument, I can take cows off. It doesn't matter if it rains on this farm. Okay, cool, but you're still going to slow your grass growth down. Like you still have something you can't control.
You still have an expense from that, right? Like you still have to put, you're either going to have to put feed in or send them somewhere else and pay for that, unless you have a magical fairyland of 7 farms that are unstocked that you just move them around when the weather gets bad, then which is no one has. That's more like a fantasy novel.
Who's that? Good on them.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. But exactly, and that's the scary thing, I think, in terms of just sitting back and sort of rationalizing a little bit. It's a tough one to see otherwise. And like you say, there's so many products out there in terms of how to do it, but it's also just I don't care if you use them or not, but it's the realization of if you're not going to do anything about it, then that's the decision you've made. And it's and I know we all love complaining about something. That's what we do. Humans love to complain, but again, like, and the other one too is it's a pretty hard truth for a Kiwi farmer to listen and realize is that we are price takers, right? Like we are in a commodity market, a perfectly competitive market in the commodity world. We are price takers at the bottom of the value chain. We have very limiting bargaining power with our buyers because if we don't produce it, someone in Australia will produce it, someone in Argentina will do the same thing. It all ends up in the same place.
But here's the point: is they've already have produced it, so it's not even that they have to produce more. They just basically send a ship in a different direction.
Exactly, and that's the kicker. So, like to complain about the market's really done me dirty. No. Or Fonterra has set the milk price wrong. No, guys. We're as farmers, we operate as in a perfectly competitive environment. We have no monopolistic power. If the buyer says I'm not paying that price, the buyer doesn't pay that price. It's really simple. Unless someone else is going to take his volume and move that elasticity outcome, guess what? That's the price we're going to get. And so it's one of those things of like you can complain about it or you can do something about it. And in all honesty, I wish I knew that when I was farming. I would have had very different outcomes. And obviously no secret, I'd really love to buy a farm one day. And going back to what I said earlier, we have these discussions what we'd do differently now if we were going back on farm. Well, I'm probably never going to be back in the cow shed, as much as I love milking cows when I get back there.
But yeah.
Oh yeah,
maybe not full time, but you will be.
Correct. But just that realization of, right, I've learned so much out of the business, off the farm, that these are the things I'd take back and these are the things I would do. And these are the things I try and encourage other farmers to learn about. Even just get someone in the area to help them learn about it, discuss it, realize that these things are there. Even if you don't use them, like, it's not the point. It's just knowing that they're there. It's the same as, it's the same as having a torque wrench in the toolbox and never using it. Like, it doesn't matter if the manual says it needs so many foot-pounds of torque. You've got a torque wrench. You don't have to use it. You can just tighten that thing up as much as you want and be happy with it. But knowing the knowledge that you've got that tool and you know how the tool works, that's the difference in this situation. And I think that, or I hope that would provide a lot of people in terms of a forward view and realization that those things are out there. And then hopefully on the other side of that too is it expands the ideology. What else is out there? What else can I do in my business? What can I challenge myself to learn this year? For example, it could be milk price this year. It could be, how do I change my banking? What do I do? You know, all these things on the finance side of things. How do I change my nutrition program? What do I do in terms of this? Am I feeding the right thing? Can I get someone else's advice on nutrition? Can I get someone's advice on soil fertility? Maybe how do I challenge my vet to help me with my lame cows? What all these, can I improve my mating?
What data can I look at?
Yeah, and that's the thing. Most farmers, the vast majority of farmers will say, "Oh, I'm always doing that. I'm always trying to improve," and I would agree with that. But the hard thing is, how do you actually sit down and say, right, prove to me you're improving this? Like, let's write something down and say, I want to improve beyond this because I think I'm doing better. I think I'm doing better. And then someone turns up, usually LIC rep or your Fonterra guy, and says, well, actually, this is the data. This is the line. Let's draw this line and say, we need you to be above that. Oh, okay. And so that's the same thing for anything. It's not just milk price management or anything. It's pick something and try and get better.
It's that other set of eyes, isn't it? Question yourself. Are you really improving? Are you actually evolving?
Oh, yeah. And that's and I hate to attack Kiwi idioms because we're so proud of them, of the old she'll be right. And I know it gets bandied around a lot in agriculture in New Zealand.
She won't be right.
No, it's never going to be right. You've got no control. So the she'll be right thing is usually I've just put a bit of wire on it and I can tell that it's probably going to hold together until I get it back to the cow shed. The she'll be right thing with revenue doesn't really work. Like, you don't have that piece of wire on it. You've let someone else tie it up. You haven't seen it. You don't know. You're relying on, like, my favorite one is you're literally relying on a whole bunch of buyers in China to set your milk price where you hope it's going to be. Doesn't really always work like that. So and put that back in my world as well. Like, I was thinking about that when you were talking before, is as a farmer, we think about that. But for me, I put something out, like I put a forecast out, I put something out, I write something, and then someone else will ring me or email me or see me at a conference and say, and I've had this a few times, Stu, talk me through your forecast because I think you're wrong.
Yeah.
Okay. And I go, right, okay, well, I need to evaluate that and look at it and cool, and go through it. And it's the same as with your view on milk price or your view on interest rates or everything or production for the year. Right. Prove to me that you're right. Tell me work me through where you think you're right and wrong. I want to challenge you on that one. And I, as a dairy farmer, would always not push back, but was always not very receptive to those sort of challenges and the gung-ho, I can do that, don't you worry about that, friend, perspective to now being like, okay, actually having someone challenge me on those things is a really good thing, helps me grow, and the realization of someone else's perspective on things is actually really helpful because you get that other viewpoint of being like, oh, I've missed this whole corner of something, or actually I was doing 60% of it right, and the other 40% is actually really important, but I had no idea I was missing it. And that's that sort of power of who knows who it's going to be that can do these things for everyone, but there's someone out there that will challenge you, and sometimes the challenge will be unhelpful, and those ones you've got to take with a grain of salt and carry on. But some challenges are actually really incredibly helpful, and they can do things for you that you had no idea about.
No, Amy Castleton trained us well, didn't she? She was out because I'd always have some cockeyed bloody story or idea, and she'd be like, "What? How did you get there?" Challenged in a beautiful way. But I think for her, having those sorts of people that help you understand how to mentally cope with that, like you say, instead of being defensive, Okay, cool. Talk me through that.
Oh, exactly, and it's a maturity thing. It's a strength, a personal strength thing as well. Like you say, you don't need to cry in your soup about it, but having someone challenge you is sometimes worthwhile and very, very
Powerful.
building. Yeah, powerful. It's great for you. It's just sometimes finding the right person to bounce those ideas off and get that feedback from. And that's what I was saying before, of just make sure you pick and choose. And sometimes the right person for some aspects will be the wrong person for other, and vice versa.
What are the things you're going to be like? What are the two things you're looking at in the market at the moment? Like the key kind of indicators that you're either concerned about or excited about?
Oh,
Well, it could be both because
I
I know that you can
was
run
going to
a
say.
fine line with both of those.
Yeah, I think the big one for concern, and every dairy cocky in New Zealand's going to hate to hear this again, obviously, is China. And I'm going to expand that outside of dairy as well, because it's not just dairy that it's affecting a lot of other commodities as well. Their trade surplus was about $100 billion in May. Like they're not importing as much as they are exporting. And to put that in perspective, they're basically exporting a third more than they're importing. So their own imports are affecting the rest of the world. Global economies are hurting because of it. So that's the sort of overarching theme of what I'm worried about with China. But putting back on the dairy cap is actually their dairy production. Milk in China continues to grow. Their milk price is at a 12-year low. It's not slowing their production down. Again, one of those things that needs to be realized is that the Chinese market is very opaque. We think New Zealand grass production is a black box, but China production as a whole, the China market as a whole, is another greater, bigger, more opaque black box. But milk price isn't driving the same result it would in any other developed dairy market. It's just not the way it works in China at the moment. Food security and self-sufficiency is so high up on the agenda in China that the government and the population is getting behind that as much as they can. They're trying to build this self-sufficiency, and it makes sense because you can, as a Kiwi, you go, oh, they don't need that. They don't need that. Why are we doing that? Well, every other market in the world has basically got to dairy self-sufficiency as well, like hundreds of years ago.
Yeah.
China's just catching up now as they include in their diet, see the value of protein in their diet, and understand how much of a resource dairy is to their economy, and from a health perspective to everything else. Pizza without cheese is not a society to live in.
No,
So
hell
that's
no.
that. No.
Or
And
without
so
butter.
that's that.
Oh, butter.
Wow, yeah, exactly. How do you have a croissant without butter? Um, but that's the kicker. So like looking at China at the moment is, yes, we've seen less demand from them, but let's put that statement in perspective. We've actually exported year to date, 24, we've exported more dairy to China than we did last year. But again, the demand is lower overall, aggregate demand. We've exported more, but they've taken less from Europe and the US. So from our data, it looks really rosy, but actually the prices don't reflect that. The overall market doesn't reflect that. And so looking forward, the question is always, how long is that piece of string? And that's one of those questions that gets really hard to answer. We don't know, to be honest. We put a best guess on it would be maybe 6 months would be the optimal outcome. But the truth of the matter could be 24 months. We could be 24 months before we see them level themselves out and get back to reality. The other one for there, you put a timeline that far out, like we discussed earlier, and then you've got all these other implications that can happen as well. So you've got geopolitical risk, you've got currency risk, you've got all the list of shipping risks. Everything turns up on that weather risk. It's endless on that sort of time frame. So China's not likely going to explode in demand in the next 6 months, and for me, that's a concern in terms of prices going higher. Obviously, I place that because buyer and seller, it's a different determination. The other one probably is going through in my head because there's two really close to the top here. It's probably geopolitical risk at the moment too. So China somewhat weighs into that, so it's sort of doubling over. But again, like we discussed at the start of this podcast, Trump and Biden, Biden no longer in the race, but the Trump presidential potential is a big one. What that then means for the Ukraine-Russia crisis, that's an unknown. A lot of people have their opinions at the moment. We don't know what that means for Europe in the next 2 years. We don't know.
It's perception, though, isn't it? It's perception of what this means that drives the fluctuations and the volatility. Is someone's
exactly.
perception of what will happen.
Exactly, and that's the thing of, like, if you were putting the sort of perceptions that are already within the media on a spectrum and attaching risk to them, they're all pretty risky. Even if things don't boil over in Europe and things get better in terms of no war or less war, that sort of humanitarian crisis that it is, that's still an unknown because that changes things as well. So the fact that we have that happening and ongoing, and the Trump presidency probably presents some changes to the outlook of that pretty rapidly. We don't know the policies that's going to come out. That's that uncertainty. That's the risk. But then you sort of track from the Ukraine crisis down to the Red Sea. That's still ongoing. We still have that ongoing conflict and tension in the Middle East. The tension in the Middle East has rallied up in the last 6 months or year, to be honest, to a point that has probably happened kind of like boiling a frog, right? Like the tensions happened slowly and steadily over the last 12 months again. That everyone's aware of it, but I don't think they're actually aware of the tension that's in that situation that could snap and, we have another real problem, be that an oil problem, be that a demand problem. And let's put that demand problem in perspective of New Zealand. The Middle East at the moment has grown their dairy demand 17% in the last year to date compared to the year prior. So that's a massive chunk. They've almost managed to offset the demand from China to a point. They didn't do it completely, but they almost tried, from the top 5 exporters. We have tension there, or we have sanctions or something going on in the Middle East, and we just take a hit out of that trade data. That's going to hurt New Zealand dairy again. And so that's those two. You go to Taiwan, China. What does that mean? What does the Trump presidency mean for that situation? What is, all these things weighing up at the moment. Geopolitical risk right now is pretty spicy, and that's the short term. The other one that's on the tacked onto the geopolitical risk for me is, what does trade look like in the coming years as well? As a tiny trading commodity exporter in the bottom of the Pacific that no one really cares about, our access to free trade is huge, and we really rely on the other side of that agreement actually fulfilling their duties within our free trade agreements, because if we don't have them, we're buggered. With America in the last 8 years, the World Trade Organization has become a shadow of its former self. We don't really have a functioning WTO. We're reliant on bilateral trade agreements. We're trying to pencil as many as we can at the moment. But again, if geopolitical tensions happen and people start realigning their alliances and these politics actually start becoming real, for New Zealand and its trade, that's a serious concern. And it wouldn't take a lot to sort of dismantle some of those free trade agreements. And for a Kiwi, you look at the challenges we've had with just Canada. So a very Western, mature economy,
very
with
nice people,
very nice, very functioning government, very wealthy, and we can't get any progress, or we're getting very slow progress on the trade outlook within dairy and Canada and their quota markets. So it just, for me, just highlights the risk that we play in of, it's all well and good now where things are tracking okay, but things can move quickly and you just never know when that one's going to snap. It's like driving down the road. If you're getting a flat tire on this trip or the next one, but eventually your car's going to get a flat tire. One day or the next, it's going to happen. And it's, for me, those are the big ones looking forward. Is China's top of the list, and it's always going to be for Oceania, a key trade partner, that goes without doubt. And big shout out to the team at Fonterra and everyone else within the dairy industry, OCD and Synlait and everyone with those relationships that they work really hard
it's
for.
Massive,
Huge
and every
respect
day,
to those
right?
guys. Oh, every hour of the day. I can be out talking to the Fonterra team, or we have beers with the team, or whatever it is, and they'll respond to emails on the way to the pub saying, "Oh, I need to get this," and that's that realization of what they have to do in the market, for me viewing them and as an ex-farmer saying, okay, these guys are here doing their hard yards for us. But again, put that in perspective, these guys are holding relationships with big clients that are built on connections between humans, and if something goes awry with that networking or that relationship, things can fall apart pretty quickly. And like I said before, if they're just buying whole milk powder or skim milk powder, you put the phone down to New Zealand and you pick up from Europe, or you ring America, or you ring the Aussies, and you get basically the same product on a ship, and it turns up in the same way, and you've got no idea at the end of the day when your product gets put in front of your consumer. So, there's that much in the value chain that can move in a hurry. It's mind-boggling.
Yeah, and I guess when I'm hearing you speak, it puts into perspective oh God, I'm going to have to spend $1,000 on a winter consent. Sometimes people need to read something other than a rural magazine, read something global. There's something liberating about having things you can't control. Everything will always work out. Focus on your business and get shit done. Don't complain about dumb shit in the scheme of things.
Well, and put that into further perspective. As a broker and as in the futures market here in the US, like, regulations for me are huge. For me to put a trade through, to be registered to broke, just if I move in the US, like if I move my address, I have to tell the NFA straight away. If I the regulations in the finance market are huge, and so as a farmer, I'm like, okay, Now I realise what they're talking about. Like, actually, we've been pretty lenient for a while, and like I say, some of them in the last sort of 10 years have been questionable. Not going to get into that debate, but like, let's be honest, regulations come as we mature as a market. This is how things work. Unregulated markets are pretty fun times to be in, but eventually someone's going to clamp down on you because you're probably either A, operating outside of your externalities, or B, someone else is going to turn up and try and compete, and they're going to use regulations to slow you down. So that's just the reality of the thing.
which will come from geopolitical pressure and trade.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yep. And you talk to any trade negotiator, anyone in policy setting, or anyone embassies about what they're doing and how they're dealing with things. Yeah, that's front and center. The things that those negotiators try and deal with in the room with those other guys, it's the same as you go to the bank or you go to your feed merchant or anywhere. You want the best deal you can get, but so does the other guy. And so to think that he has to do something better for you is ridiculous. Like, at the end of the day, the best you're going to do is cross the spread between the two ideas and get the best outcome. You might think you win, you might think you lose, but at the end of the day, you're not going to get everything you want.
And you have to suck it up and deal with it and get on with it. And
100%.
complaining about it doesn't actually make life go faster or better.
And that's you. My wife will tell you I love to complain, and she's probably not wrong, but it doesn't help anything. Sometimes it helps to voice the opinion, and I get that.
Yeah, you get it out off your chest, right? But that's it.
No, exactly right. And some days you got to try and win the battles you can, and sometimes those aren't the battles you're going to be able to win, because unless you can, get the whole industry together and actually have some clout on that one. But then at that point, by the time you get everyone together, you're going to learn a whole lot and probably have a very different opinion than what you had on your own in the back blocks of the Waikato too. It's all a journey, and complaining about something short term is probably going to lead to either a lot of angst early on and nowhere gained, or a learning journey that actually might provide you either the same outlook with a better education behind it, or a very different outlook and a lot of education on the way through as well.
Yeah. So that leads me to my last question is, what is your greatest wish? Now, this can be for agriculture, for New Zealand, or for the world. Just like Miss
Ooh,
Universe. World
Miss
Peace.
Universe. Would I be Miss Te Aomuru or Miss Canterbury? This is a tough one.
I think you'd have to go Te Aomuru. Yeah.
Yes. Oh,
Yeah.
missed opportunity. Where do we go? That's the tough thing. I think the big one for me is, well, two things. I think everyone has a desire to be able to do what they want to do at the end of the day. Like, we all are very individual humans at the end of the day. And that's, for me, a big one, is being able to make your own decisions and find out what you need to do, make those decisions as informed as you can and go and do them. I think the big one for New Zealand, and I speak to agriculture, I don't speak to the rest of the New Zealand because I've got no sort of realm on that, but I think is actually getting everyone back in the same bus and driving towards the same direction for me. Like a big thing that I learned from Kellogg, and it sticks with me every day in this industry, and especially when I think about the farmers, that as a farmer, you get up in the morning, you might see the same 4 guys on the farm, or you might see your tanker driver, you might see your vet, whatever it is. You have a very close view of what's going on, but you also need to get out above the trenches and say, what is everyone else doing? Are we on the same bus in the same direction? Can we all help achieve our individual desires collectively as an industry? And what does that mean? And I remove dairy from the industry line as an agricultural industry. How do we get together and actually continue on the same direction? Because it is important for all of us to be on the same page. It's not important to be arguing about the minor things. It's important to be discussing the big things, but actually having the nous and the maturity to sit down and say, what are the big things? What are the things we actually need to battle? Because sitting in that Kellogg course, whenever that was 5 years ago, and realizing that actually the battles we all fight between industries, be that arable, dry stock, horticulture, dairy, everything, aquaculture, is that we all face very similar challenges.
Yeah.
How do we stop this I need, they need, or I need more than they need mentality, and say, can we actually sit down together as a primary production unit and say, how do we go together? How do we go forward? What am I doing that's hindering you, and what are you doing that's hindering me? And how do we solve those two issues? And these discussions have happened and people, especially the Kellogg team, and shout out to them, they're brilliant. The siloed thinking has been going on and on for years and years because we think that we're different, but at the end of the day, we're not. If we're going to continue down primary production, then at the end of the day, some of it gets consumed in New Zealand. Most of it ends up on a ship or a plane going offshore. We all enter the same markets one way or another. We have the same challenges in convincing our consumers that they need to buy something from another country. We need to convince them to keep that trade open. And if one of us in that chain of farmers, be that red meat, be that kiwi fruit, be that dairy, lets one of us down, we're all going to fall down at the same rate. And that's the scary thing, is like, if we don't have a concerted single front as agriculture, it's going to hurt more than it is the one person that's going to win. And it's that, for me, that's the toughest thing, is how do we get everyone in a room, have the mature discussion, remove all the who wins, they win verse, and just get on with the how do we win together? How do we bring prosperity to New Zealand? Because that's, at the end of the day, going to be key. And if we can go down social license to operate in New Zealand, but at the end of the day, agriculture is going to have to do its fair share in both earnings for economy, but also bringing everyone together. And food is a great way to bring people together, full stop. So let's rally around that and move things forward in a result that wins for everyone. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to happen this year, but that would be my wish, actually, is we could all get together and as an industry and just plod on and make New Zealand, excuse the Trump claim here, but make agriculture in New Zealand great again.
I think it's a beautiful place to end it. Thank you so much for your time and your wisdom. You have lots of stuff that people can hook into, right, with High Ground. I know that your reports are sensational, so if someone wants to invest, it'll be a very good investment.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we do a lot around podcasts, reasonably US centric with some New Zealand thrown in there as well. Big one, like I said in the podcast, more than happy to help anyone in the New Zealand industry, more than happy to have a chat about anything. Obviously, milk price and market insights is what we do best, but anything else, if you just want someone to talk to or bounce ideas off, more than happy to talk. Look me up on LinkedIn or look me up on the High Ground Dairy website. More than happy to have chats and just love helping people. More than happy to get involved.